Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Ranney, and I serve on the board of directors for the Grand Canyon Historical Society. And we welcome you to tonight's virtual outing. The Grand Canyon Historical Society, our mission is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. And just last year in 2024, we celebrated 40 years of existence when the society was started by some pioneer members of Grand Canyon Village. We encourage you to become a member. Our dues are only $35 a year. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we're hopeful that many of you can join us so that we can continue to expand all of our activities like these virtual outings and in-person outings and our tri-annual history symposiums. If you do become a member, you'll get 4 issues in the calendar year of the Old Pioneer magazine, which has a lot of history articles about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon region. So we do these virtual outings. We conduct tours at the South and North Rim, and you can find it on our website. Our website is very easy, grandcanyonhistory.org.
So it all starts with Harvey Butchart. I mean, everything all starts with Harvey Butchart. This is a copy of my book that I bought back in 1979, I guess it was, 1979. And at the time, you couldn't buy that book in the park. You had to buy it from somewhere outside. I must have got it in Tucson. And you can maybe tell that there's some tape on the side because I used to carry it around and I underlined a lot of stuff and used it. And the second book had come out by that time to sort of plan out the hikes that I was starting to do at the Grand Canyon. That carried me for a long time, probably really until Steck's books came out, when I was able to supplement those into these descriptions. Now, of course, there's a lot of information around, and there's probably a lot of people that don't know Harvey or don't know about his original books. There's a picture of him from birthday party with Kolb. Must have been, was it 62, I think, something like that, sometime in the 1960s, that I found that I thought looked kind of nice, a different one than we're used to seeing. Well, if you don't know about Harvey a little bit, he was born in China. He moved to the United States with his family when his father died, raised mostly, I would say, in Illinois. In 1945, he moved to Flagstaff and got a job at the university. Well, it was a college back then, what became Northern Arizona University, and taught mathematics, retiring in 1976, and did, of course, a lot of hiking. Somewhere along the way there, it must have been in the early 80s. I used to go to the Special Collections library at NAU, which was in a little building on the south side of campus, not where it is now in the library, and look at his journals and read through them. And then later, probably in the early 90s, when they had it in the regular library, I was able to get a photocopy of his entire journal, over 1,000 pages, typed, single spaced, and so pretty pretty hefty. You had to get his permission to get a copy, so I wrote to him and started up a conversation with him, and enjoyed that over the few years that he still had around here. But like I say, everything for me at least starts with Harvey, and in the book he mentions the O'Neill Spring. And so on page 31, O'Neill Spring, shown on the map south of the trail up the west side of the mesa, Horseshoe Mesa, cannot be trusted. Well, that's like all he says about it. But of course, I want to see it at some point in time, so it's on my list of 1,000 things to do at Grand Canyon. Here's what he also had to say about it in his journals. This was an early one. This is like 1957, I think. And he mentions, we investigated O'Neill Spring at the end of the spur trail just below the red wall as you're going up to the mines. I came to a fair-sized hole under some mauve rocks, but there was no water in it at this time of the year. It was damp, however, and had one willow growing out in the middle of the depression. Page 25 of his over 1,000-page journal, so it was an early hike. And he used a couple of different names or spellings for this, and this has been a source of ongoing confusion, I think, with regard to this spring and a couple of other springs. O'Neill, I'll get to that a little bit later, but there is an O'Neill that's N-E-A-L. There's another O'Neill that's N-E-I-L with one L, and then there's Bucky O'Neill with two L's. So here's this is the map, 1962, the real big park map. I don't know if they still sell this anymore, but I bought copies when I was back there in the late 70s, early 80s. And it still showed O'Neill Spring on the map. And so all the maps from 1905, when the first one came out, until 1962, had the spring on it. And most of the maps up until this time also had the trail that led to the spring. But you can see that the spelling is with two L's, which is Bucky O'Neill's name with two L's. And it was very consistent across all these maps over all these years. Here is an old map. This would be the 1905 map from Francois Matthes. And so you can see Horseshoe Mesa and the trail that goes down from the rim and then down into Cottonwood. And then there's O'Neill Spring identified on the map. And then there is a trail that is shown that goes over to the spring. Now, I went down there first and to look for that in 2012. 2012? No, it wasn't 2012. I was down there in 2000, before 2000, looking for this trail. And if you go down there and you kind of stop and you look off onto the hillside, you'll see many trails, because you'll see burro trails that are still there, that are still impacting the environment there. But I went down and checked this out sort of for sure about 2000, in the year 2000. Here's a picture I took of the trail as it was in 2012. The trail that's coming down into Cottonwood is actually on the left-hand side there of the picture in the sunny part, and the trail comes along. You can follow it pretty well if you take care. I mean, there's rocks in the way and so on, but you can see that there's definitely a path here to follow to head out to the spring. Here's another picture looking at what you would see that would sort of stand out. And the trail is in the best shape in this very first little bay. And then as you go around the corner, all bets are off in terms of whether or not you can find and follow it. And so here's a picture I got in 2000. I was down there with a friend of mine, John Eastwood, and we lost the trail when we came around the ridge, and we wandered around a long time, but we found the spring. It's underneath this ledge, and it was full of water. And that has been kind of a surprise in that I haven't run into anybody else that has actually seen water in there. Harvey was there in 1957 and then later in 1971, and he didn't see any water in there. And I've been there now 8 times, and I only have seen water this one time. This was it was actually June of 2000. It was hot. It was dry. In fact, the water in Cottonwood, the arm of Cottonwood, the so-called wet arm, was dry as well. So it wasn't like it was a super wet time period. Some people have speculated that the occasional little earthquakes or whatever disrupt these water channels, and so that's probably what's happened here. but I keep going back, hoping that sometime I'm going to actually see some water. So here's 2012. I went back, and it was pretty much bone dry. You can kind of see in the wall next to me, in the middle of that space, there's a little hole, which looks like maybe you could have put in a pole or something and hung a bucket back when there was actually water, presumably back in the days of the mining activity. And so 2013, I went back. It was I want to say it was right after, sort of during the monsoons. And I thought, well, maybe it's picking up water from the monsoons and the runoff, but not at all. It was still very dry. That tree is barely eking out a living. Here's 2015, which is sort of reminiscent of Harvey's description that there was some dampness to the ground. There's a little bit of sort of mossy area down there. And I don't know if you could dig down and get any water, because it's a very cramped little spot. Then I was back in 2017. This is a picture of the general area. The spring is under that ledge. And again, you're not going to see it until you're actually on top of it. And in 2000, until we actually saw the water. I put that care in there way back then, 2000 and actually 2012, I think, and have gone back and sort of scouted around. I found this big water can, so I stuck that there too, just as a symbol of the fact that this was once used, presumably by the miners. Although they had the water from cottonwood, so that would have been something they would have used more often. And then here's another picture from 2018 with a bunch of folks. I guess a couple are here today. And this was in August, so it was really hot then, and again, still very dry. Now, the last time I was there was 2021, and that was the year that we had all the rain. So the rain was really wreaking havoc on parts of the Grand Canyon, not to mention Flagstaff. And it also wreaked havoc on this trail. So I've kind of outlined where the trail is. And now there's this big ravine that's scoured through there. I was with my buddy John, and he was willing to go out and check the spring, and it was dry. But I was put off by this pretty awful looking scree slope. So I didn't go out there then. It's probably easier to come up from the bed of cottonwood, although, again, you're probably not going to know exactly where it is as you start up. So back in 2012, I posted up a blog on this, because that was the first time I was back since 2000. And in my blog, I mentioned the fact that it's on these old maps. And I said it's called O'Neill Spring. The spring was named for Bucky O'Neill, sheriff in Prescott, one-time Grand Canyon resident, of course, member of the Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and died in the Spanish-American War in Cuba just before the Battle of San Juan Hill. And I didn't see his gravesite. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery, but I saw the monument there that is dedicated to the Rough Riders. And it's sort of interesting to note that it took a year to find his body in Cuba and bring it back for burial. So everybody knew he had died, but weren't able to locate the body for some time because of the chaos, obviously, during wartime. And there's also, of course, Bucky O'Neill cabin at the South Rim Village, and Kevin apparently is going to talk about Bucky here in a few weeks. Well, I got a note from Doug Nearing. You may know Doug as a longtime Grand Canyon hiker, and also a real good scholar of Grand Canyon history. And this is what part of what he wrote to me. He said, I happen to have 2 editions of Arizona Place Names by the University of Arizona Press, a 1960 hardbound and a 1988 paperback. The spring does occur in both, but with wholly inconsistent documentation. 1960, page 152, O'Neill Spring named for Jim O'Neill, 1L, a scout for General George Crook. 1988, page 309, O'Neill Spring named for Bucky O'Neill without an E. And there's a variety of sort of ways in which that is spelled, but I think E is the one that is favored by most people. And so that got me started on this quest to figure out what was going on with the name. So there's sort of the first quest is to see these places, and that takes a long time. And now it's like, okay, what's going on here? Why are there are these two names? Why is there this kind of confusion? And what's really going on? Well, the name with O'Neill with 1L, Jim O'Neill, a scout for General Crook, comes from Byrd Granger. And I had this copy of Grand Canyon Place Names published in 1983. And it's just a subset of the names in the Arizona Place Names, that book is shown there, that was published in 1960. So Arizona Place Names was published by the University of Arizona, authored by Will Barnes. And I'll talk about him in just a moment. And there was this idea that Barnes made a lot of errors and mistakes and so on. And Byrd Granger came along and decided to not only fix it up, but expand it. I mean, she really added a lot more to this volume of Arizona Place Names. I mean, it's an incredible effort. But that wasn't the only thing she was interested in. She was interested in a lot of different things. She had her own public relations firm. Before World War II, she was born in 1912, died in 1991. She had like I say, her own public relations firm. And during the war, she was what was known as a WASP, which is a member of the Women's Air Force Service Pilots Squadron. So the picture there is her basically strapped into an airplane seat. And so she was a pilot during World War II, part of this group. Not a whole lot, I would say, is sort of known in general, or at least by a lot of people, but a very interesting sort of sub part of World War II. There's their wings, and then a picture of some of the women that were these pilots, and she was one of these pilots. In fact, the last thing she wrote was a history of this group, published in 1991, the same year that she passed away. She also had a PhD from UCLA in education. She was interested in folklore, and she was interested in place names. She was interested in a lot of different things. I mean, she was really had a wide range of interest. In fact, I was doing a search, and out on Etsy, they're selling this mosaic bowl that apparently she made. She signed the bottom, so I guess that means she made this bowl. I guess it was maybe a hobby of hers or something. I didn't find anything else about that side of her, but kind of interesting little color commentary in that regard. And then here's what she has to say about this spring from Arizona Place Names 1960 and Grand Canyon Place Names I think it's the same one in 1983, maybe not. And it's the spring named for Jim O'Neill, a scout for General Crook. 1880, O'Neill was living in Prescott. And then there's a reference. And then I started getting into it and trying to figure out what that reference meant. Well, turns out it's not that complicated to those who know, but I didn't know. Now, this started kind of an interesting little controversy of sorts among her and Barnes, although Barnes had passed away many, many years earlier. In 1983, she published this book, X Marks the Place. So the Arizona Place Names in 1960 is authored by Will Barnes, but revised and extended by Byrd Granger. And again, like I say, it was a massive expansion in that regard. Well, in 1983, she publishes a book just under her name, X Marks the Place, Historical Names and Places in Arizona. She has O'Neill Spring cited here a little bit differently. The spring was named for Jim O'Neill, now with two L's, born 1844, Ireland, a scout for General George Crook, and another reference. And the reference is to the Arizona Historical Society, which is what I was able to find out after some digging around. So we're going to come back to this a little bit later because I'll show you what that reference actually looks like. Now, I did some digging around, and I was able to find a copy of the decision card by the Geographic Board, the Board of Geographic Names. And so this is a copy of that card. And it says O'Neill with two L's. It's a spring. This is actually listed at the USGS as a historical reference as opposed to a current reference because it's not really around anymore. It's not on the maps anymore. Grand Canyon National Park, 1¼ mile below Grandview Point. It has some various spellings there with one L or two L's. And it's on the Vishnu sheet, 1907. So actually, I think I mentioned Matthes 1905. It's actually the Vishnu sheet, which is Matthes and Evans, which was 1907. That was the second quad published. And then even on the East Half map, and as I mentioned, still shown on the 1962 map. It says named for Bucky without an E, O'Neill, pioneer and one of Roosevelt's Rough Riders, probably, which is an interesting caveat to all this. Approved May 4th, 1932. The date it was submitted was 1930. Now, as it turns out, Will Barnes, the author of the first edition of Arizona Place Names, and who ascribes the name of the spring to Bucky O'Neill, was a member of this board at this time. So presumably they're going off of his information. I was able to ask someone later about the work, I think it's called the work card that goes with this decision card. And what he said was that the work card was written later, so it doesn't have any more information or anything that would add to this. Now, what's also interesting is on the back side of this card, it has this written in. O'Neill Spring with one L. The spring was named for Jim O'Neill, a scout for General George Crook in 1880. O'Neill was living in Prescott, 1960. Barnes, Arizona Place Names, page 152. And it looks like after the 1960 revisions came out, somebody wrote that in. Somebody there at the Geographic Board, the executive secretary, Lou Yost, I was able to correspond with a little bit, said that she had come to their office while she was putting together the book in 1960. And so I think he knew about it, or maybe he just had heard about it. So presumably when that change came through, maybe she informed them that they should make that change on the card and somebody added it on the back. So sort of an unknown here is who made this notation. Presumably the reason why was because of the new book. And is that the only reason? I suppose it is because the word probably was on the front side of the card anyway. Well, then that takes us to Will Barnes. Will Barnes was born in 1858, died in 1936. The book, Arizona Place Names, was published in 1935, so he died just a year later. He was 78, so he was quite old at the time. He had won the Medal of Honor for his action in the military here in Arizona at one of the battles that took place here. He was 20 years in the Forest Service, starting in 1907, and the story is that's where he got a lot of these names and origins, is that he basically collected them for years and years and years before putting them together into this book. He is buried in the Arlington National Cemetery due to his service in the military. Now, one of the things that I think causes some confusion, and this gets to the issue of sort of this conflict between Barnes and Granger, is that in 1988, this book, Arizona Place Names, Will Barnes, was republished. It's just the same book as 1935, but it was republished, and so it looks like a brand new book, for all intents and purposes. So now what you end up with is there's a 1960 reference and a 1983 reference from Granger. Probably nobody knows of the 1960 too much anymore, but the 1983 reference. And then there's a 1988 reference. And so it looks like it was changed from Jim O'Neill to Bucky O'Neill. But of course, that's not the way it is. It was Bucky O'Neill. And now we have two different sort of competing sources explaining where this name comes from. And so this, again, is the one you can buy, in the store now or off Amazon or whatever. Probably, I would say it seems to be a little bit more widely available than Granger's book, even though it's still about the same number of years old. There are a couple of smaller books I've seen that have kind of Grand Canyon themes to them. If anything, they usually skip over O'Neill Spring because it's not on the current maps. Well, here's what Barnes has to say about O'Neill Spring. Grand Canyon National Park near Cottonwood Creek, 1¼ miles below Grandview Point, named for Bucky O'Neill, just as we saw on the decision card. And of course, that now stands in the new book here that we have available. So, what did Granger do? Well, this reference, Arizona Historical Society Files 63, is the same. Well, 63 is the 1880 census, and 261 is a reference to a book that is called Pioneer Stories of the Verde Valley. In fact, we should pop that up here. Pioneer Stories of Arizona's Verde Valley. That goes back to the 30s, but was published again 1954. And it was a collection of basically old timers stories about people that lived in not only Verde, but in the general area. And page 159 has this section here. This person, Lee Newman, a good narrator, told all these stories. And down at the bottom of the first column, you can see that he knew all of the original settlers in Flagstaff and remembered that in 1880, the following were the entire population. Well, I mean, this is kind of bizarre. There's only 13 names on this list compared to today. But if you skip down there to number 10, there's Jim O'Neill. Jim O'Neill with one L of O'Neill Springs. So now it's like, well, wait a minute. Jim O'Neill is associated with Flagstaff, not with the Grand Canyon. And as it turns out, there's O'Neill Springs in Flagstaff. And that shows up on, you can look at some maps, but there's some nice discussion about that in this Kachina Village area plan. If you're familiar with the Flagstaff area, south of town, a few miles, well, past the airport, a couple of miles is Kachina Village and Mountain Air. And actually, it's on the Kachina Village side of the highway. If you drive down, you'll see this kind of old little stone building is the pump house for O'Neill Spring. And so in this Kachina Village area plan, which was published in 2008, according to Platt Klein, James O'Neill was one of the first American settlers to arrive in Flagstaff area around 1876. Soon after arriving, he established a homestead at some springs south of Flagstaff on land that eventually became Kachina Village. O'Neill Spring was a reliable water source, providing one of the essential elements necessary for a homestead. And then later, according to Government Land Office records, however, a person named Oscar O'Neill, and there's that O'Neill with EAL, acquired a major portion of the meadow from the U.S. government in 1884. The springs are named in various documents as O'Neill, EAL, O'Neill 1L, or O'Neill 2Ls. Well, in 1980, the USGS and the the Board of Geographic Names put O'Neill Spring on that spring with 2 L's. And so it seems quite clear that O'Neill Spring that Granger is referring to is the one that's in Flagstaff and not the one that is in Grand Canyon. Now, I mean, she has thousands of entries and certainly cannot spend very much time on any one of them. And I've spent more time than, really can be justified in that regard, trying to figure this out. But I'm pretty sure then that the name comes from Bucky O'Neill, not from this Jim O'Neill. And so I think that is solved, but I can't say for certain because I haven't been able to find any sort of additional documentary sources in this regard. And so that got me interested in Francois Matthes. So he and Richard Evans did the Vishnu quadrangle, and Matthes pretty much did the Bright Angel quadrangle by himself. Matthes joined him in 1903, so was there for a while. And the name is on the map, and I'm wondering, well, how did he put that name on the map? And is there some way for me to find that out? And so that started me looking for some journals that Matthes would have kept or might have kept that might have clued me in this particular regard. And so off I go trying to discern whether he did. And the first thing I have to do is I have to find these journals. So this is a picture of the Special Collections Archive in NAU in Flagstaff. So I went there, talked to a librarian there, and didn't write people's names down all the time, unfortunately. But this was back in 2012. And the librarian there actually knew Byrd Granger. And she said, well, the story was that Will Barnes made a lot of mistakes. And so, she fixed them up. As it turns out, she may have made a lot of mistakes too. It is a huge book after all. And so, that's maybe why we have 2 competing books now, the X Marks the Place and the Arizona Place Names. And then she referred me to Kate Reeves down in the Arizona Historical Society, because she said that's what that reference is, that AHS. So I was able to correspond with her through email about some of these issues. And she wrote back to me that they had Barnes's original notes. And so there was a note in there where he had put O'Neill Spring with EAL, not EIL or EILL, EAL. And he said it was after John O'Neill, one of General Crook's scouts, but then he crossed out General Crook. So it was like he wasn't sure about it or something at the time. And so maybe this was just some preliminary information. But he does mention that in his notes that the land was bought by this Oscar O'Neill, even though now it's the name is ascribed to Jim O'Neill. So that was kind of interesting. And then I did some more searching around. I went to the web where you do the ask somebody a question. So I went to asknps.gov and I explained the thing about O'Neill Spring and asked them if they knew anything about it. And the reply was, we have no idea what that's about. I wrote to the folks at Charlotte Hall because Kate down at the Arizona Historical Society said, oh, there's this guy at Charlotte Hall and he's a real expert on Bucky O'Neill. He probably knows everything there is to know about him. And if the spring was named for him, maybe he would know. Well, I wasn't able to find him, and whoever I was able to find didn't know anything about it either. I made a trip to the USGS offices here in Flagstaff to their library thinking, well, this would be the obvious place to store his journals right here in the library. And I think I got there maybe a week before they closed down. There was some budgetary issues. And so the USGS was going to close down one of their libraries, and it turned out to be the one here in Flagstaff, so that they only have one left in California and the one in Reston, Virginia. So they didn't know anything about a these journals anyway, but they also were kind of in the process of closing down. So then I ended up writing to another ask USGS about this. And I got a nice reply from a woman there named Cheryl about the O'Neill Spring reference. And then she referred me to Lou Yost, who's the executive secretary of the Board of Geographic Names. And so we corresponded back and forth a little bit. And mostly what he said was, gee, all the stuff you know is, all the stuff we know. And you probably know more about some of these things than we do, but didn't have anything else to really add to that. So then a couple of years passed, and I wrote to him again about this, and I said I was going to go to Denver, Colorado, visit some family members. And Denver, Colorado is actually another place where they have a library. So they had 4, and they now have 3. So the Federal Center in Denver, I thought, well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to visit the library, and I'm going to find Matthes's journals. Well, not so fast. There's the building in Denver. I went up there one day, and it was a Thursday. And I say that because there was one guy in the library named Gary, and he said, oh, you want to talk to Steve, and he's only here on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, just a part-time guy. So I turned out not to be a very good plan in that regard. He also he said, well, if there is such a thing, it probably should be here, but he didn't know where. So I started corresponding with Steve Ryder from this library, and he actually said that, in fact, it should be there, that there should be a volume of papers that are related to the survey. And he says, but he hasn't seen it in years. He doesn't know where it is. But yes, this is where it should be. But he also opined that I probably wasn't going to learn anything from it. And he sent me an example of what some of these notes look like, and they're just, data basically that got to go into the map itself, as opposed to any narrative as to why did you name this spring, this particular way. Well, I still thought that it was named for Bucky. I feel pretty confident in that, but I can't find any original source. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to the library here, Klein Library, and I'm going to start looking at the newspapers from Flagstaff back at that time. The Flagstaff Gem was one of them. The Coconino Sun was another. The Arizona Champion was around for a while there as well. And they have all kinds of ridiculous information. I mean, this is before the internet. Now the internet has all the ridiculous information, but they're full of things like, oh, so-and-so came to town, is going to spend a couple of days. John Hance is putting a fence up around his house. And it's like, I guess, when you don't have the internet, how are you going to find out about some of these things? Well, that's how you found out. So I started looking through these microfilms, and way too interesting. I made all kinds of copies of things like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. And I tried to wedge it between when Bucky O'Neill died. And so this actually is the paper, July 7th, 1898. And you can see that second column says a brave man killed. And that's the sort of initial discussion about it. And then in papers for weeks after were about Bucky O'Neill. And 1903, when Matthes put that name on the map, I'm figuring, well, all I have to do is kind of look through the newspapers, and maybe I'll find some reference to, oh, Pete Berry was in town and he says they're going to name a spring after Bucky O'Neill in his honor, whatever. Well, that hasn't happened. I looked for a while, and then I had to kind of give it up for a while because it was way too interesting. And I do actually have other things I needed to do because I had a job back then as opposed to now. But then at one of my visits to the library here at NAU, Klein Library, the special collections, the librarian there was saying, well, let's do some more searching. And he found that the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley had Matthes's papers. They got, boxes and boxes of Matthes's papers. So I was able to go there online and look at their, look at what they've got and try to figure out what I can, what I would be interested in. Well, I found they got all of his journals. And so it turns out that you can get these journals microfilmed and then photocopied and then sent as a PDF file. But they're sort of pricey unless they've already been microfilmed. Well, as it turns out, there were 3 microfilm rolls for his time in Grand Canyon, and they had already been done. They already had the microfilm, and so all they charged me for was the PDF files. So it wasn't very much to get those. So I got copies of his journals for 1902, 03, and 04, which is the time he was at the Grand Canyon. Now, if you don't know much about Matthes, there's his picture, relatively younger days. Born in 1874, died in 1948. Born in Amsterdam with a twin brother who also ended up in the USGS as a well-known hydrologist, apparently well respected in that regard. They had malaria. I don't know if they had malaria or they had some sort of symptoms of malaria. So the family moved them into the Alps and into Switzerland for a number of years. So they knew how to speak Dutch. They learned how to speak French. He went to school in Germany. Both boys went to school in Germany, learned German. They learned English while they were there. So, really well educated. The 2 boys came to the U.S. at the same time and went to MIT in 1891. In 1895, they graduated, and in 1896, Matthes went to work for the USGS to start doing his mapping. First as a kind of an apprentice and working his way up, and he was there for 50 years. So here is the first entry into his journal when he arrived at Grand Canyon, March 31st, 1902. And the last line is kind of interesting. Left on train, because he was in Williams, left on train for Grand Canyon in the evening, arrived 11 p.m., set up tent in the dark. And then the next day, he's starting to doing work and was pretty much keeping his nose to the grindstone for many years in that regard. Now, what interested me, of course, was what's going on with O'Neill Spring. Well, I didn't find anything in there on O'Neill Spring. It was just a dry well in that regard. But how can you stop reading a journal from this map maker from back in 1902, 1903, and going through some of his experiences? He was there about a month and was doing a horse ride down into the canyon, and coming back somewhere in the red wall, he writes that they had to get off their horse and walk him up because it's really dangerous and steep and loose. And the horse knocked him over, and he hit his head on a rock. And then the horse stepped on him, and he was unconscious for a few minutes anyway, until his friends could rouse him up. The horse took off for the rim. They ended up putting him on a mule, and in his journal for the next 5 days, he complains about how his head hurts. And it's like, yeah, I bet that was probably an event you don't want to have to think about. But as I'm reading through this, I come across this name of Wash Henry. And so here is the 2 explicit references. August 5th, so he's been there a few months, wrote to Ralph Cameron about use of his boat to cross the river with. Wrote to Wash Henry for a description of his route up Bright Angel Creek. And then Wednesday, August 6th, went down the Bright Angel Trail, slow traveling behind tourists. Some things never changed. Took trail to Pipe Creek and thence to Old Wash Henry Trail to the river opposite the mouth of the Bright Angel Canyon. Found trail badly out of repair, but crossing good. Climbed out of canyon and arrived at hotel at 8 p.m. And so on the map, we see this trail. This was one of the trails I talked about in my presentation a couple of years ago. And so I'm looking at the map and I'm looking at this description and I'm thinking, oh, this trail, which we have been calling the Old Miners Trail for many, many years, is really the Wash Henry Trail. That's the way he refers to it. And then the trail going up the Bright Angel, he's referring to also as a route associated with Wash Henry. At the time, he was not convinced that the route up Bright Angel Canyon was really going to work. So he and a couple of guys and their supplies, they hired Louis Boucher and they headed west to Bass's place, and they crossed the river at the bottom of the South Bass Trail and then up to the rim, and then spent a couple of months surveying until they got to the Bright Angel Canyon. And then there, in October, in his journal, he says, learned from Anderson, one of the guys in their party, that Murray and Farrell of the Bright Angel Hotel have come across via BA Canyon, which surprised him. And then a couple days later, found trail on which Murray and Farrell came up, and he did not like crossing at Bass, didn't like the Bass Trail either. And so he already knows about this Wash Henry Trail on the south side. And now he's starting to think, oh, I can just go down Bright Angel Canyon and then come back up the Wash Henry. So November 2nd, Anderson and Price go down the Bright Angel Canyon to get the trail into shape, make sure they can, take their animals down there. On the 16th, by then they had done all those crossings, the 85 or whatever it is, crossings of the Bright Angel Creek, and had gone down, done some more mapping. And on that date, they crossed the river, swam the horses behind them, as sort of illustrated in the pictures, and then took the Wash Henry Trail up to the Tonto and then over to Indian Garden and then back up to the rim. The next year, in 1903, they returned to continue their survey work. He was able to talk the USGS into buying a steel boat that came in two parts. And they once again went down the Wash Henry, crossed over into the Bright Angel, over to the North Rim, and then a month later came back the same way. So they used that trail in both years, and I feel, quite confident in saying, yeah, that's what we should call it. We should call it the Wash Henry Trail. Now, that trail was not used for long, for a few years. In 1907, Russ built the cable across with the tramway, and then a new trail came down to the cable, to the tramway, which is variously referred to as the Cable Trail, or also by Russ referred to as Wash Henry. So I don't know, Wash Henry was involved in some of these things, but I'll talk a little bit about him in a moment. But then after 1907, that first trail no longer really gets used, and people use the tram, and then of course later the swinging bridge, and then later the Black Bridge, because all those are in the same place. So here's a picture of the map, the old map. You can see Indian Garden there, and then there is the Wash Henry Trail, or again what we used to call the Old Miners Trail. And it is interesting to note that it fell off the map, and then it really kind of fell out of everybody's consciousness. And I think if you're familiar with Harvey Butchart, you know that, well, a lot of things sort of fell out of consciousness, and Harvey Butchart kind of rediscovered things, and he didn't rediscover this trail, but he writes about it in 1971 about talking to some rangers down at Phantom, talking about how they found this trail, and he says, oh yeah, this is a neat old trail, but he had not known about it. And so then nowadays I would say people probably know about it more often. I think there's the trail again, and then I got a couple of pictures. This is my spot GPS map when I went down and came back on the Old Miners Trail, or the Wash Henry Trail. Parts of it are in really good shape. Actually, a lot of it's in really good shape. So there's a couple of pictures there. On the Tonto, there's a big cairn to note. This is my buddy Bill. And if you look there, there's the Black Bridge. Great views from along that trail. I've never gone down it. I've only come up it. I've come up it a number of times, but I'm not sure I'd be too comfortable going down it. And then here's the South Kaibab, and the end of the trail. Wash Henry comes up here, and right up there is where that big cairn is. So who is Wash Henry? Well, there's another question, kind of where this research is going a little bit. I did some searching of some newspapers, and I found little references to him. 1890, he's been out for a hunting trip. Apparently liked to hunt a lot. He owned a saloon in Flagstaff, the Jim Saloon. This is from 1890. Here's 1891. He's moved into the Murphy building, which is more convenient. Here's a interesting thing about his old place is now being taken over by Kisling-Bury and West. And so these kinds of things pop up in the newspaper, 1891. 1893, he's in a little bit of trouble in terms of paying money for licenses, I guess, for his business. And the paper is taking a dim view of his attitude in this regard. And then 1901, there's a little note here about him once again going out and then coming back. That kind of information in the paper quite often. So, you know, the Wash Henry Trail is, I think, kind of the cool end to this story. I'm sure that the spring at Horseshoe Mesa is named for Bucky O'Neill, even though I'm not able to find any, you know, sort of original source there. To close, there's a couple of books I could note in this regard. Michael Anderson's Living at the Edge talks about the Wash Henry Trail that goes down to the cable car, and just a little brief reference, but it's kind of neat that it appears there. Frederick Swanson's book on Dave Rust and his life. I was reading through some of his Rust's journals for the time he was making the cable. Very interesting. And then Davy Crockett, I think, who's here today, has a nice new book about rim to rim history, and he's adopted my idea here to call this the Wash Henry Trail. It's not really an idea. I think it's really the name that was originally applied to that old miners trail. So hopefully I haven't gone too long in this regard. I thought this was going to be way too short of a presentation, but looks like I'm finishing up just right.
That is lovely, Dennis. That's
Thank you.
really, really nice. You want to stop your screen share, and we'll go back to everybody here. Dennis, the first question I've got for you this evening is a question I should have asked you right at the start. May we have your permission to record your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you, because we did that, and now we have the permission to do it. So that's good. I have a couple quick questions for you before we open it up to the floor here. You mentioned that the willow that was in front of the spring died. And also that reminded me that the Page Spring on the other side of the mesa had also dried up. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, the Page Spring's still there. It's the overhang has fallen down.
Okay.
Now it's harder to collect the water.
Okay.
It was never, you know, very much to begin with, but it was a nice pool that could fill up. And the willow I don't think is really dead. But it's not doing as good as it was doing in 2000 when there was water there and I saw it. So, you know, maybe it would come back if there was more water there.
Okay. All right. And then last question for you here is, why do you think the geographical board wrote probably on that card?
I don't know. It's like somebody wasn't sure about it. I don't think it was added in later. It looked like it was part of the original entry. And it just could be that the information flows from Will Barnes through various sources to Washington, D.C. And then when it gets there, somebody says, oh, this is what they're saying. And there's not like any documentation. So we'll just, you know, say this is what it seems to be.
I mean,
although that might have been why Byrd Granger took a closer look at it.
Without that word, probably, it's a done deal.
Yep.
Really fascinating. Mark B has asked, is WASH short for Washington?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I suspect it is. I think one of the pictures I showed was the thing about his bar, and I think it says Wash with a period, Henry. And so I think it probably is short for Washington, but I haven't seen any reference to a full name in that regard. I guess maybe the next thing to do is to look for some census information from 1890 and 1900.
Yes, for Flagstaff. That would be a good handle on that. David Crockett is here tonight, and he says, thanks, Dennis. Yes, I used your material online to help me understand Wash Henry Trail and connect that with some of the old travelers' accounts. All seems to match up. So that's pretty neat. Terry Cleland has a question here. She said, great presentation. How can we find your blog? And then Haley Johnson has typed in how to get to your kaibabjournal.com website.
Yes.
So
And
that's good.
And there's a list of different links on the webpage. The first one is a photo blog, which I could promote a little bit, where I posted up one picture from every day I've hiked in the Grand Canyon in calendar order. And so it's like, okay, I just picked one from that particular trip. And then there's a link to my Grand Canyon hiking trips, and they're broken down by section of the canyon, south of the river, north of the river, sort of from east to west. And then you can kind of find stuff there.
Cool. With that, let's open it up to the floor here. If you have a question for Dennis, unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and let the questioning begin.
Oh, I might also mention the quotes from the journals. Both Jonathan Upchurch and I have both sort of been looking at that, and he has done some good work there, especially his wife has done some good work there, typing up some of that information.
Super. Are you thinking about doing some more work on the Matthes Evans project now that you've got the journals?
Yes, I mean, I'm thinking about it, but
Cool. I mean, do you think there's enough material in there to give you a pretty robust understanding of what was going on?
oh yeah, he does a pretty good job of explaining where they're going every day, what they're doing every day. He doesn't get into the technical details so much. In fact, Jonathan mentioned that there are some papers, I think, in Minnesota, University of Minnesota, for one of the guys that worked with him, Rodman, a Rodman or a lineman or whatever, Stewart. And so that's kind of like the next rabbit hole that has attracted my attention, even though I'm not through with this rabbit hole.
Yeah, and Kern Nuttall's done some really great work on that as well. Yeah, it's always just been fascinating. And I suppose that the Bancroft would actually have the letters, actually any correspondence going back and forth, and that may have some interesting material in it as well. But there's another rabbit hole for you.
Well, and it's still, I don't know if anybody here knows this, I don't understand how names get on maps, except of course the Board of Geographic Names, says, okay, this is the name and here's why. But the name is on the map in 1905 and the decision card is from 1930. Well, then what was it in 1905 that led them to put it on the map in the first place? And I don't know if it's like, well, it was like, maybe it was topographer's discretion.
Or there was a change in policy and procedure within the USGS, and somebody in the early 30s hand transcribed a whole bunch of material from earlier data. I mean, just throwing that out.
They decided maybe we should have a board.
Yes, yes, very, very possible. But again, I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue. Haley, did you have something you wanted to mention about some upcoming outings?
Um, yeah, Tom, I have a couple things I want to mention.
Go for it.
First, 2 questions for Dennis. Hi, Dennis.
Is that a question?
No. um, First question is coming from my friend Christy. Her iPhone's acting up, but she messaged me and asked if I would ask you if you are if you know where or if the Mathers journals are available to view online or for purchase or anything like that.
To the best of my knowledge, no. I mean, I have the gigantic file, and actually Jonathan was trying to help me figure out how to compress them into a way where you could actually access them. I think I sent, I was able to upload them to a Dropbox once, that somebody could access because they're, well, it's a large file, so the email doesn't work. And I don't know, you could publish the actual pictures of the journal, but I'm not sure how useful that would be.
Makes sense. Thank you. Christy, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, message me. And then second question, Dennis, is where are we, you going next?
Yeah, I don't know. Tom asked me that before we started, and when I was saying that I've never done the rappel at Royal Arch. I've hiked down to the rappel and I've hiked up to Elks Chasm from the river side. But I was there in 1981. There was a rope hanging, and I spent about 40 minutes looking at it and deciding not to do it.
All
So
right,
I'm
so
kind of interested in doing that.
we'll write that down for well, that would be really fun. Yeah, that'd be really fun. And then let's see what else. For anyone else who's listening, if you have any other questions, feel free to jump in. But really quick, I'm gonna plug the coming up events for Grand Canyon Historical Society in June. I did get in touch with Emily Dale from NAU. She is putting together her archaeological field school up here by Grand Canyon, and we are doing 3 in-person events with Emily Dale to the Apex Field School. And those are going to be, they were emailed out to you today. They are on our Facebook page and they will be on our website shortly. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, thanks, Jonathan. Look at that.
I could mention one other thing. Out on my
Yeah,
website, I did post up a trip report of sorts of the Wash Henry Trail, where I took pictures going all the way up the trail from the river trail to the Tonto, and then kind of annotated them. I suppose I should have really done a video, but I'm still old school in that regard.
That's awesome. I don't see any other questions coming up. Well, thank you, Dennis. It's good to see you.
Good to see you somewhat.
You saw me for a second. It's really dark in here. I'll let's see who's left in here. There's 20 people left in here. Let's see. No one else has a question. I bet Frank Fegans must have a question.
So I have a question here that I'm going to jump in and ask Jonathan.
All right.
Hey, Jonathan, how can people get in touch with you if they want a copy of the Matthes journals? And you can unmute yourself or type in your answer.
Yes. Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I'll put an email address in the chat box.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Now,
Dennis. Oh, go ahead.
Are you saying those journals are too large to email? So they must be like 100 megabytes or so. They're fairly large.
Yeah, they're fairly large.
Okay. And you have them up on a Dropbox somewhere?
I put them on my Dropbox, yes. So if you send me an email or something, I can share it with you.
Okay,
I think that works.
what,
I'm not sure exactly. I tried to do that recently. I haven't heard back if it didn't work or if it did work.
can we share your email with everybody here tonight? Dennis, can we share your email with
Sure.
everyone here tonight? You want to put it in chat? That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually think Jonathan, I think you sent me those a couple years back, or one of them or something. I think I recall that. So thank you for that.
So Cody had a question about the upper miners route, if it's the same as the Wash Henry.
Like through the red wall?
Yeah, the
when you go-
skeleton point route.
Yeah, that's a route. I wouldn't say it's a trail at all.
Yeah, because the South Kaibab didn't exist, I think, when the Wash Henry was put in.
Yes, in fact, if you look at the map, I think if you can see the map that I posted up in my presentation, you'll see that the Tonto Trail veers closer to the rim where the Wash Henry is.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
But of now it's rerouted up the hillside much further.
yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised no one asked how to access it. It's a pretty fun trail.
Mhm.
If you know where it is. It's just a little bit downstream from the Silver Bridge, if anyone wants to try it. It's
I was
pretty easy to follow.
I was actually supposed to be hiking out of it this morning.
Oh.
Oddly enough. Yeah.
But you didn't.
No, Haley tends to be very accident prone. And
Oh no.
I took a misstep at the Ed Caboti and the Yodis show on Saturday and rolled my ankle and tweaked my knee.
Ouch.
But worth it though, because Ed Caboti and the Yodis are phenomenal. So
Oh.
totally worth it.
Well, with that, if there's no more questions for Dennis, maybe we will wrap up this Tuesday night presentation. Last call. Well, I hope to see you all again. 2 weeks from tonight at 6 o'clock is the Bucky O'Neill event brought forward by Kevin Schindler and Haley Johnson. And then 2 more weeks after that, Melissa Sidney is going to talk about the 1938 Botanical Expedition. This has been another wonderful event. I want to thank Dennis Foster and Karen Gregg and Haley Schist for your help behind the scenes with doing all the moderating here. And we hope to see you all in the next couple weeks.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who joined.
Thank you, Dennis. You take care. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dennis. Good night, Tom. Bye, Karen.